after waking up from a surgery like that and realizing that I got to go home and raise my kids, it just made me realize that everything, every little thing is such a blessing. Well, it was about halfway through 2020, and I was pregnant with my fourth baby, who was a very unexpected surprise, and everything was going okay as it could in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. But I started having headaches, which we kind of just attributed to, we thought maybe we were gonna have a boy since I had had some headaches when I was pregnant with our one and only son so far. But as my pregnancy progressed, the headaches just kept getting worse and worse. But I promised I would get it checked out after the baby was born if they didn't go away, if it wasn't from pregnancy. But also around August or so, I noticed that I lost the hearing in my left ear. And then shortly after that, I started noticing I was having major issues with my balance, like worse than normal pregnancy imbalance things. But again, we just kind of chalked it all up to pregnancy, and I promised I would get it checked out after the baby was born. In October, our sweet baby girl was born, and then I never got to go get everything checked out because when she was 4 days old, I was already in so much, or still already in so much pain that I couldn't function. So my husband Matthew took me to the emergency room in Scottsbluff, which is about an hour from our house. And an MRI showed that I had a large brain tumor, and it was also causing severe swelling in my brain. So the tumor was blocking the fluid from being able to get down into my spinal canal like it's supposed to, which meant I needed emergent brain surgery. And that meant I needed to be flown to Swedish Medical Center in Denver, which is the best neurology hospital in the Midwest. But it was a typical October in Nebraska, and it was sleeting and really foggy, so a helicopter ride was out of the question. I mentioned that I worked in Scottsbluff at that hospital for 7 years before we moved, and as God and his planning would have it, a physician that I had worked with a lot in those 7 years was the ER doc that night, and so I think he maybe pulled some strings and went a little above and beyond because they were also trying to find an ambulance since a helicopter ride wasn't an option, but all the ambulance crews were out on emergencies also. But he found an ambulance from Torrington, which is about another half an hour west of Scottsbluff, to come take me down to Swedish. So it was about a 4-hour ambulance ride. But the second or third hurdle was that since I needed some really strong medication immediately, and while I was on that long transport, I needed more than paramedics with me. I needed to have a registered nurse with me. But since all the crews were unavailable, that was a situation. However, Matt had called, while I was having the MRI, Matt had called one of our closest friends, and she'd come down to be in the emergency room with us for support, and she happens to be a flight nurse. So she clocked in and rode in the ambulance with me to Denver. And once I was there, that was a early Sunday morning by the time I got there. They just wanted me to stay on the medication to see if they could decrease the swelling in my brain enough to make surgery a possibility, to make it safe enough that they would attempt a craniotomy. Supposed to be one day, and then surgery got pushed back. So in those 2 days of waiting, obviously my family was on my mind the whole time. I remember writing notes in a journal and making videos on my phone for each of my kids and my husband. And it ended up being a blessing that my surgery got pushed back because we called around to nearby churches to try and find a priest to come pray with me and offer me confession and do anointing of the sick. And so I know that gave me a lot of peace, because I just remember those couple of days in the hospital feeling very calm. And it's hard when you're waiting for surgery and they give you a time and then they push it back and then they give you another time and push it back again. But I was just unusually calm since, up until that point, I'd never had any kind of surgery. I'd never been under anesthesia. You'd think I would have been a wreck, and my entire family was, but I just was like, it's just another day. I'm just gonna have brain surgery. It's no big deal. But I know that being able to have a priest come pray with us really, I can't speak for my husband, but I know it gave me a lot of peace beforehand. So, and I also remember in that time in the hospital, in the neurology ICU, calling my mother-in-law who had my newborn baby, and I got really emotional and broke down and was crying and asked her, because I didn't know how long, we had no idea how long I would be in the hospital after surgery. So I just remember breaking down and asking her, what if my baby doesn't remember me when I get back? And of course she told me, she'll remember you, she'll know you. And she did, she was right, but it was just such a blessing to have all of my kids with, the baby was with my in-laws, and our 3-year-old was with my parents, and the older 2 kids were with my sister-in-law and brother-in-law who lived just a mile away. That way they could still go back and forth to school. So I knew that all of my kids were, as much as I missed them, I knew that they were all in really good hands and being taken care of. But before they took me to the operating room, they wanted to take me to interventional radiology to do a procedure where I had to be under anesthesia already, but they would go up through my groin and into my brain to cauterize, like cut off blood supply to the tumor, because it had lots of vessels into it and around it. And so they did that, but they took me right from there to the operating room so that I wouldn't have to be under anesthesia twice, which, as someone who had never been under anesthesia before, I really appreciated that they planned that so well. So that was their plan, was interventional radiology first and then the surgery. And they had prepared my husband and me that because of the size of the tumor and how vascular it was and all of the, like, it was around my, whichever cranial nerve it is that deals with your hearing, which is why I lost the hearing. So they wanted to try to resect that nerve carefully so that maybe I could have the hearing in my left ear back someday, which was the least of my worries at that point. But so they prepared him that it would likely be 12 to 16 hours that I was in surgery. And it was afternoon by this time. And like I said, it was during COVID. So they had to make some allowances to be able to let him spend the night at the hospital, since they knew that I would be in surgery overnight, which was really amazing, because I can't imagine him having to leave the hospital when I'm having brain surgery. Went to interventional radiology and then to surgery, and after 4 hours, they were done with surgery, and they were able to remove the entire tumor. So that was one of many miracles, at least by our definition of miracles. And the tumor was benign, and around 6 weeks or so after surgery, I did get the hearing back in my left ear. But I'll back up a little bit. After surgery, they had wanted me to stay intubated for around 12 hours or the day following surgery, because they weren't sure if I would be able to breathe on my own or swallow on my own, since the tumor sat back here by my cerebellum, which is an area of your brain that deals with those things and kind of important things. So, but just a few hours after surgery, I guess I was trying to pull the breathing tube out myself, and so they were able to extubate me, and I was breathing on my own and swallowing on my own and didn't have any trouble with that. And same way with, they weren't sure, since I had had trouble with my balance before and just where the tumor was located, they weren't sure if I would have weakness on my left side or be able to walk on my own. But right after I was awake and extubated and everything, they got me up and I was able to walk on my own and didn't have any troubles. I did have a little bit of weakness on my left side just for probably the day after. But it was a really great feeling to wake up and realize that I could talk and move and walk, and just lots of blessings. And I will never forget the look on my surgeon's face when he came into my room in the ICU, because he obviously thought I would still be intubated like he had planned, and there I was sitting up talking to him, and I said, I have 4 children, I really need to go home. So they let me move out of the ICU into a regular room, but I did stay a couple more days to make sure that I could go up and down stairs and shower and do all the things that I would need to do at home, because they knew that I had a newborn that I was going to need to take care of along with my other children. But so I spent a couple more days there, and then by the grace of God, I got to walk out of the hospital on my own 2 feet and come home.